Welcome to She Speaks with Yana Me podcast, presented by She3, offering relatable, healing, and authentic content. In today's episode 105, we will talk about communication and how it affects the mother-daughter relationship. I am your host, and you are listening to She Speaks with Yana Me. So today we're going to talk about communication. Communication within the mother-daughter relationship and how communication affects the mother-daughter relationship. I have to say that communication is definitely one of those tasks that is the hardest to master, and that's in any type of relationship. And the number one thing that we want in any relationship we hold in our lives, whether it be romantic, family, friends, or work, is communication. And you want strong communication, clear communication. You want to be understood. You want to understand the other person, right? So I think it's one of the hardest things in a mother-daughter relationship because you're dealing with two women who are so much alike in so many ways, majority of the time, right? There's a saying that it's hard to parent the you out of your child. And I think that holds very, very true. They always say that your daughter is your tester. You know, she tests you, and it's just so hard to talk to her. And then you have, the grandmothers who might say, well, she's definitely a lot like you at that age. You hear that a lot. When you have your daughter, it's really you talking to the other half of you and trying to get through to yourself, what you want to say and what you mean. I think it's hard because these two women in this relationship want to be understood and want to be heard. Right? And when we want to be heard, we don't really listen to actively listen to what the person is saying. We listen to reply because we want them to know how we feel and what we're saying. And so that's really one of the biggest issues I have seen within a mother-daughter relationship. I'm going to talk more later on in the episode about, the different ways of communicating and about active listening. I'll get into more of that. But that really is the start of it. Communication is everything, right? And you want to do it right. You want to be able to, I know growing up, I wish that I had that open communication like that with my mom. That's not really how our relationship was. Now, though, me as an adult, we talk about everything under the sun. Like, we literally sit on FaceTime sometimes without even talking just because I know she's there and she knows I'm there. But we talk about everything now. Our relationship now is how I wish that it was when I was younger. Because there are some things I wanted to know about and, just be able to talk to my mom about that I really couldn't, right? So I want to start off, I guess, with talking about my different examples and introductions to communication. So, like I mentioned in the last episode, my mom's best friend, my Aunt Virginia, I loved their relationship. My mom taught me how to communicate with my friends. I saw it. And so I have mirrored my friendships with the different women in my life off of the relationship I saw between those two women. Because it was important and it was awesome and it was great to watch. I just loved it, right? So I learned how to be a friend from my mom, especially in my adult ways. And a kid in high school, I don't think I was a great friend, but I definitely learned being an adult, what friendship was really about. And I've used that relationship my mom had, like I said, to mirror my friendships off of. The relationship my mom had with her sisters, her and one of my aunts, the baby girl, my auntie Tabitha, are very, very close. Very close. And it's almost like a best friendship. But that's her sister. That's like her baby, too, like my mom's baby. She's, significantly older than my aunt. So she was like, when my auntie was born, I won't say in a whole adult, but she was close to it. So I learned what I wanted a relationship to look like with my own sister. That relationship is it used to be a good relationship. We used to have a relationship, but not really right now, right? Sisters go through things, and this is our time to go through things. But I would like to mirror my relationship off of what I've seen with my mom and my auntie Tabitha. Now, my mom and her other sisters, that's a totally different story. And then how my mom was with us, with me and my sister, that communication was quite different. So going off of how I communicate with my mom, or how my mom communicated with me growing up as a child. So my mother was an authoritative parent, right? And if you're not aware of, there are 4 different parenting styles. You can be a permissive parent, authoritative parent, uninvolved parent, or authoritarian. Authoritative parent is really just, they're responsible. They're responsive. Um, No, authoritarian parent is, little warmth, autocratic, high expectations, structured environments, punishment, emotionally distant, clear rules, power over, and because I said so. Right? And so I don't want to say my mother was all of these, and I don't even think she had high expectations. I think her expectations of me were normal, so to say. I did have a structured environment, and the rules were very clear. And it was, she was the authoritative figure in my life, and she was, the power was in her hands. She told me what to do, when to do it. Like parents do. Not something that's so different. I would say she was definitely the because I said so. That's what it was, because I said so. No explanations, right? I try to be an authoritative parent. Let's talk about it. I always want to talk. I think I often want to talk is because I didn't get to talk that much with my mom. So I've always tried to talk about stuff, even if I'm telling them something that they don't agree with and they don't want to hear. I still ask them, like, yesterday I was talking to my daughter, and we are at an impasse or something. Like, she got like this major attitude right now. She's been walking around with for weeks. And I asked her yesterday, I'm like, what is the problem? Like, really, what is going on? What is your deal? Tell me. And, she just shrugged her shoulders. Nothing, But I always want to talk about it. I'm a talker. I love to talk. Obviously, I have a podcast, right? They're responsive parents. Authoritative parents are responsive. They're reciprocal. They're power with and not power over. They have high expectations, clear standards, democratic, assertive, and flexible. I'm not always democratic, but I try to be. I do have high expectations, which I am learning to be more flexible with. I think that has really been one of my things as well, is the high expectations, which is always not fair to your kids. You want them to know that it's okay. If you don't get an A, it's fine. You don't need to get an A. I'm not going to, be on your butt about, just different things like that. So my mom was an authoritarian parent. So our communication was quite different. It was her telling me what I was and wasn't going to do, when to be here, when to be there. Just, this is what I said, do, listen, go do it. We didn't really talk. I would have wanted to talk about the different things going on in my life back then. Boy issues, school issues with my friends. She was there for parent-teacher conference and that type of stuff. But when it just comes to those personal relationships that you develop at that age that you want to be able to process with your parents, I wasn't able to do that. So that is what I learned as far as communication. So just to give you a little background about how I became a mom, my introduction to motherhood was through my husband, who had a daughter when we met. She was 2. And she came to live with us in New York when she was 2.5. And she's been a part of my life ever since. He had custody. She lived with us. And, she was like my first baby. My second introduction, and I was at the age of 19, by the way. 19-year-old step-parent. I got married at 19. So I was a 19-year-old step-parent. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I got married at 20. It was a couple of months after I turned 20. We got married. So I was a 20-year-old step-parent. And it was my example for being a stepmom came from my mother as well. I feel like she was an awesome stepmother. She treated, even though she was authoritarian, she treated everybody, kids, awesomely. And she treated my dad's daughter like she was her own. She spoiled her like she spoiled us. She did for her like she did for us. So my example of that definitely came from my mom, and I did the exact same thing. I bought her all types of crap that she probably didn't even want or need. Like, it was a new adventure for me, having a kid at 20, and I just went on a buying spree. Um, yeah. And so my second introduction to parenthood was I had my son at the age of 25, and then I adopted my cousin, who was a teenager at the time. So she's my oldest. She's 23 now. She is my oldest baby. And that was a hell of a ride, I will say. But she was my oldest baby. She was my third introduction into being a mom. It was definitely a blended, different type of family. So even though she was my third baby, she's my oldest baby. So I tell everyone she's my first baby. That is my first child. That's my oldest daughter. It was definitely different being 24, 25 at the time, parenting a 14-year-old. Well, she had turned 14. That was difficult and different. And I want to say, so the communication with her definitely mirrored the communication with my mom at that time. So, and she went through things as normal kids go through with the change of environment. She was very rebellious, very rebellious. You couldn't talk to her. You couldn't tell her anything. It literally went in one ear and out the other. It was different for her, and it was something she needed to get used to. And one of the things I realized a couple of years later, when I was working as an adoption preservation counselor, how ironic. I became adoption and preservation counselor, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 years. No, about 3 years after she came, after I got her. And one of the things I realized that I became aware of is that when you bring a child into your home, you automatically think that child trusts you. And I was like, wow, I automatically thought that she was supposed to trust me because, one, we're related, and I love you, and, you're safe. So, and it didn't dawn on me, which is so crazy. It didn't dawn on me for a couple of years after that no, that's something that has to be built regardless of who you are and what you are to me. I have to learn to trust you. And I think that's one of the things where a lot of adoptive parents go wrong when they're having these issues with their kids, is that you automatically assume that your child trusts you. And that is not the case, and especially not in those situations. But anyway, yeah, she was very rebellious, and you could not tell her anything. So with her, I was very, very authoritative. I was very strict and had a lot of rules and very clear with them. But it was kind of like, thinking back on it, of course it was so many different things that I could have did differently. But I was 25, I think I was 25, and I didn't know. There's no manual, especially, there's no manual to tell you what you should and shouldn't do and how this is supposed to go. And what do you do when you're dealing with a child that's adjusting, and have whatever issues that they have. And I was also at the time going through, I had started my master's program the summer she came. I started that fall. And it was crazy. I'm going through this counseling program. I'm trying to learn some things about myself and different ways the purpose wasn't to learn different ways to parent, but, you start becoming more aware of yourself when you're going through those type of programs. You become more aware of who you are and how you communicate and your own stuff that you have to deal with and all of that good jive. So being in my mid-20s, having a teenager was different, especially when it's a teenager that I didn't raise up to be a teenager. And we're clashing with the different personalities. So like I said, I wasn't flexible. I was very, very strict and probably difficult. And she probably felt, and thinking back on it, she probably felt in prison. She probably felt like this is boot camp and I can't do anything. But it was because, I'm trying my hardest to counteract what she is doing and I was just getting stricter and stricter, and things wasn't getting better. And when it comes down to it, it comes down to communication. Even though I communicated, I didn't ask the right questions. I didn't ask what it was that she needed or what was difficult for her, any of that, I assumed, which played a really big role in the communication, the way she communicated with me or lack thereof, and the way that I communicated. I want to say it was not an ego or pride. I just assumed that you know who I am, and you know that I love you, and you know that I'll keep you safe, and I'll do right by you. It was that, and it was very difficult. I still find myself feeling bad sometimes about how things were when she was younger, how strict I was on her, and she did think, like, she will end up watching this show, Secret Life of an American Teenager. It used to be one of my favorite shows some years ago when it first came out. She just decided to watch it on, I think it was on Netflix, or it was on, yeah, it had to be on Netflix. And she was like, is this why you didn't want, and then she was still a teenager when she said this, but she was like, is this why you didn't want me going to people's houses and stuff like this? Oh my God. And I said, well, yeah, that's one of the reasons, but not the only reason. And she was like, well, thank you. And it felt good that she started to see some of the reasons I made, some of the choices that I did make. And I used to feel bad too because, I did used to believe in whoopings, right? So she got a few whoopings for some serious stuff either way. But I felt bad. I felt like, and especially now I'm in a stage where I don't feel like, now I don't agree with whoopings. So and it's an uneasy feeling when you go from knowing something and believing in something for so long to trying to change it up, and it's definitely difficult and uncomfortable. But back then I believed in whoopings, and she got a couple of whoopings, and I used to feel bad, like, was it the right thing to do, and how do you don't? I feel like she feared me and different things like that, and one day she told me, I want to say I asked her how did she feel about the whoopings and the punishment she used to be on and stuff, and she told me that she needed it, and had I not been on her and all the other stuff, she wouldn't have not went the way that she has gone now, as far as graduating and just all the different things. She just, let me know that she most likely wouldn't have done any of that, and there's no telling where she would be. And even though that made me feel good justification-wise, like, okay, I didn't damage her, thank God, it still made me feel bad because, when you think about, okay, well, that's a whole other discussion, whether or not you agree with corporal punishment and whoopings and different things like that. Totally whole other conversation. But I just don't know how to feel about that. Really, it's just up in the air. You want to be a disciplinarian, but, you feel like, putting your hands on somebody is just not what you should do, right? Used to be pro whoopings, and now I'm pro talk. But, yeah, so I want to say our initial relationship, has structured our communication. I know that she knows that I'm here for her, and I'll do anything I can for her and to support her. But she's not an open child. And honestly, she's never really been an open child. She's always been really quiet, and you have to ask multiple times for her to tell you what's wrong. And even still, then she holds a lot of things inside. And even with me mirroring her, I'm very sensitive, yo. I cry at the drop of a dime. Like, cry at commercials. I remember I was pregnant, and I had on this red pajama outfit, and my husband was like, you look like Santa Claus. And I just bust out crying. And it wasn't because I was pregnant, but I've always been sensitive. But it was funny after the fact, but it was so not funny when he said it. But I'm just a very sensitive person. And even though I mirror to her how I communicate with other people, and even when she's in trouble, I still talk. And I think I over talk sometimes. I over explain because I want them to totally understand where I'm coming from. And then they get tired of hearing what I'm saying. So it's definitely finding a balance when it comes to communication. So my 18-year-old who just left to go to school, even in that, I realized the different ways in which I can communicate differently. I see the issue that we are so hard on our girls than we are on our boys. And I was definitely hard on the both of them. I just really wanted them to do good in school and just really wanted them to keep a straight head. And I was so strict that didn't leave much room for communication and flexibility, right? I think now I became more flexible as the years have went on. But at the beginning, and I want to say for at least 5 or 8 years, that really wasn't the case. and then you think back on ways that you can communicate differently, and it's just like, oh, I did so much wrong. But which is not the goal. The goal is for us to learn and grow, right? So those were how the communication went then. How it is now, I feel like it's kind of turning into me and my mom. My 23-year-old goes through her stages, though. When she gets mad at the world, or she gets mad at me and doesn't want to talk. And right now is one of those moments where she doesn't want to talk. And then that comes with me having to be patient and allowing people to feel what they feel and process what they need to process, and then coming to you afterwards. I have the tendency to be very nosy and just, you're going to talk to me regardless, and it's a boundary issue. Right? And I feel like, but you feel like with your kids, and like I said the last episode, you feel like you own them when you don't own them. And I don't own them, and they're not obligated to tell me how they're feeling or what they're feeling right now, but it's just that you want them to. And I definitely want them to be able to talk to me. Right? And so when we talk about the importance of communication within a mother-daughter relationship, it's important because you want to be able to talk to your mom about anything. You want your daughter to be able to come to you about anything, and you guys have that talk and discuss it, and she leaves feeling better, or at least informed, right? And she understands you and you understand her. That's one of the biggest things. It affects, of course, I mentioned earlier, how you communicate affects how your daughter communicate with other people, how they communicate with other women, how they maintain relationships with other people depends on how that communication is with you. There was a young lady who I was talking to in one of the groups I was in, and she just talked about her relationship with her mom and how her mom's treated her, and how because of that relationship, she is broken and she has a lot of healing to do. And she doesn't have a lot of loving relationships, and she knows where she is, and she has to be able to heal from that in order to maintain, better relationships with other people, and before she could become a mom, which was huge. And I told her that was huge, and that she was even aware of that for herself, and that's major. So your relationship with your mom strongly affects you in a whole. It completely affects your communication with other people. Like, I was very, I don't want to say hot-headed, but I had a temper when it came to other people or how they were treating my kids. And, your kids get used to that, and they want you to pop off on, somebody if they say something to them that they don't like or stuff like that. And I'm just like, I got to do better, because my girls will be dependent on me to do that. And that's not always the best way to communicate. You don't always have to snap off on people or, pop off on people. So I had to get better with that too. And it took some patience, and me just calming down and thinking before I talk. Or sometimes if I knew that I wasn't capable of that, I would, have my husband handle it in my place. Or like one time he knew to handle it in my place, because I probably wouldn't have reacted the way I should have at the beginning. So it really makes a difference how you communicate and what you show your daughters. Right? And so right now, and also one of the other ways, like, your daughters pick up on your vibes. They pick up on your moods. They pick up when you're unhappy. They pick up when you're angry. And so I walked around with a frown, a little angry face. Like, the moment I walked through my door from work, I had a frown on my face. I could be the happiest person prior, but walking in, I had a frown, and I had my own internal issues going on. I had my own things. I was unhappy with myself. I was unhappy with my weight. It was just a lot of things that I wanted to change in my life, and it showed on the outside. And I want to say that's one of the reasons that my little 23-year-old mini me walks around with an attitude, because she saw me walking around with an attitude. I really do believe that. I made it seem normal, and it's not normal. I was just very unhappy with me and where I was in my life and what I wasn't doing and wanted to do with my life. And you really have to be mindful and careful of that, of the situations that you're in, of your happiness, because how you love yourself and how you make yourself happy, your kids can see. And then you teach them how to love themselves and how to make themselves happy. They see that it's communicated through your very being. Right? And I wasn't doing that well, for a couple of years. I was totally unhappy with where I was, especially my weight. Like, my weight was the biggest thing. Still an issue for me, but I've learned to love myself and change what you need to change. And you have to be able to show your kids to love themselves despite what may be going on in their lives. That's the most important love, is self-love. It is communicated through your actions. Communication is everything. So when we talk about communication, what is the best ways to communicate with your child? So, one, with anybody, right? And I say it with anybody because this is really general across the board. You want to take pride out of it. You have to. That you cannot be afraid to put your pride aside and talk to your daughter first. Because it's just like, I'm mad at you, you mad at me, who gonna make the first move and talk? Or you gonna need me before I need you, so I'm sure you're gonna talk to me first. Like, no. Especially if you know that you were wrong. Some parents, it's this meme that was going around on Facebook about how do black parents apologize when they're wrong. They apologize by asking you, do you want to go to the store with them? Or, come eat dinner, dinner's ready. Or do you want to taste this? Or food. That's how black mothers, they say, apologize. And it has some truth to it. If I was mad at my mom or she was mad at me, she would tell me to come ride with her to the gas station. Right? We ain't really talk. Ain't nobody really apologize or anything like that. It was, come ride with me to the gas station. Or you didn't got in trouble, but come eat your food ready. Not because it was necessary for you to eat, but that was y'all way of talking again. And it definitely has some truth to it, because I've engaged in it. I've done it as well, with them. And that comes with also being able to forgive, being able to say, I'm sorry. And I mentioned this before in the prior episode. Saying I'm sorry was a really hard thing for me to do with my kids. I felt like I was the adult and I should not be apologizing for a damn thing. But that's so inaccurate. In any relationship, things happen where you have to apologize. I didn't yell at them before for taking something they didn't take. And I'd just be like, oh, my bad. But that wasn't really an apology. Just like, oh, my bad. But y'all done took it before. So, you have to be able to apologize. You have to be able to also forgive. Forgiveness is a big thing, which I will also be talking about at the mother-daughter conference in November. But forgiveness is a really big thing within a mother-daughter relationship, and one that is not given a lot. And you have to learn to forgive. And it's always going to be for you and not for the other person. But the mother-daughter relationship is a relationship that is so strong and so influential. You have to be able to forgive and move on. And then you have those relationships that some are just so toxic and they don't want to be around each other. And I just strongly feel like with therapy, with the correct talk therapy and the help to maneuver through it, majority of these relationships could definitely be repaired. But it's just that it takes so much work. A lot of people are not willing to put in all that work. And it saddens me, because things with parents could be so much better. But like I said, learning to forgive, changing yourself. And like I talked about earlier, sometimes it takes being aware of what it is that you're going through and making those changes so it reflects better upon your kids. So how you feel and how you talk, it shows better to them. So not being afraid to change yourself, and also having realistic expectations for yourself as a mother, as a friend, and for your daughter. I remember I used to want, going into parenthood, I used to want my household to look like the Huxtables. I wanted to be a Claire Huxtable type of mother, but I also wanted to be a Lorelai type of mother. So Lorelai type of mother. Lorelai and Rory were from the Gilmore Girls, one of my favorite shows. I also wanted to be them. I also wanted to be Thea, and I forgot what Brandy's name was on that show. Or in so many shows, Roseanne. Roseanne was crazy. Her daughters were crazy too. It's just so many different shows that I watched as a mom. I wanted to incorporate into my styles of being a mom, which was not a realistic expectation, because how you parent is really going to go off of what you were exposed to within your own household, and also the type of child that you have. Because I also had to come to a realization that I can't parent each kid the same. And I also thought that I could parent, Maxine and Tasia the exact same way. What worked for this one should work for you. And I did. What I said that I didn't like my mother to do to me was compare me to someone else. I did the same thing between them. I would compare them to each other. I would say, well, if Maxine did it this way, you should be able to do it this way. And it wasn't fair. These are two different kids. And I didn't come to that realization that I was doing it too until this year. But it's all about learning and growing, So just having those realistic expectations for yourself as a mother, as a friend, and for your daughter is very, very important. Communicating actively listening and communicating clearly is very important. You want to be able to be an active listener. And what that is you're listening to what the person is saying to you and take a moment to process it before responding. And oftentimes when I'm arguing with my daughters, talking to them about something, I'm listening just for them to say something because I got to come back already. I already know what you're finna say, and I know what I'm about to say in response to that, right? And that's really not the most accurate way to do it. You want to be able to talk to them, let them talk to you, listen. Actively listen to what they're saying. Let them explain to you what they're feeling, how they're feeling. Process that, and then respond to them appropriately. We get in our feelings too as moms, and I think sometimes our daughters can forget that we are moms with emotions, with feelings, and we get in those feelings, and our feelings get hurt as well by our kids. They may not realize it, but it does, and you just want to respond, and it's just a tug of war. And sometimes it's a tug of war for power, but it's mostly a tug of war to be understood. For her to understand where you're coming from, for you to understand where she's coming from. Right? And then so you also want to repair damage quickly. So what that means is if something happens, something's wrong, you realize what you've done, or they've realized what they've done, even if they don't come to you first, talking it out. Saying that, which goes along with forgiveness, repairing whatever the issue was, repairing the trust, repairing the communication, working through that, explaining to each other how each other feels so that you can really understand each other. It really comes down to just communicating. I can't say that enough, what communicating entails. But you also want to balance being close, boundaries. So balance your boundaries, balance being close and individual. You have those, I saw some parents, growing up, like my best friend. My best friend and her mom were like best friends, even when we were in middle school and high school. Like, she talked to her mom about everything. And I wanted that. And sometimes I felt like, one, I was jealous. But sometimes I felt like, dang, her mom just let her do everything. But it really wasn't an issue because they had their boundaries. She still respected her mom, and I realized that now as I got older, she's always respected her mom. They've always had that boundary. Yes, I'm your friend. Yes, you could tell me anything, but these are the clear boundaries. And her mom had that, and she had it so to where my friend was just like me and she still snuck and did certain things, but having those healthy boundaries between mother and daughter, the lines not blurring, is very important. You don't want your child to ever look at you more as a friend than she does as a mother. You want it to be a balanced relationship. I'm your friend and your mom, but you will understand my role as your mom. You want it to be a balanced relationship. Agree to disagree. And I want to say that has been something that I have not always been easy to do because I want to argue. And I don't mean argue. I mean, I want my point to be heard and understood. And that's something I work on daily. But that's what I've always wanted, is to be heard and understood. And I will talk your ear off until you understand me. Instead of me saying how I feel and, whether we agree or not, this is that. So agreeing to disagree. And just talk about how you want to communicate. We all have these communication expectations. I want you to be open with me. I want you to know that you can come to me at any time. And we often say that to our kids, but we also have to mirror what that looks like. We can't blow up when they do decide to come to us and tell us one thing. You have to maintain that level-headedness so that you can be that person that they can talk to. You don't want to say, well, you can come talk to me about anything. And then they come and talk to you and you like flipping off your wig, going off, cussing, everything. You can't really do that. Because now I know I can't really come to you and tell you how I feel or talk to you about anything because you're just going to flip out. My daughters get mad. Well, the oldest one gets mad because, she'll tell me how a situation went, and I will immediately tell her, well, if you were wrong, I immediately will tell her, well, this is what you probably should have did or should have said, and, this is why it was wrong. She gets mad because what she wants in that moment is for me to just take her side. She don't want to hear, but you didn't tell me that's what you want. If you tell me what you want me to do, first off, is take your side and process that with you, let you vent and take your side of everything, then cool. I could have did that, but you ain't telling me that. You told me this in a whole totally different conversation of us with another friend, and we talking about what I do and stuff like that. Well, if you would have never said this, I wouldn't have knew. If you would have told me this beforehand, I could have mirrored that then. So it's really important to talk about how you want to communicate, what you want the relationship to look like, but also mirror it. Don't go back on your word. Mirror what it looks like. And that's all. And that's really what it comes down to. Communicate with your daughter how you want her to communicate with you, and keep in mind how you want her to be able to communicate with other women. And so what we will be talking about in the next coming episode, which is episode 6, we'll be talking about maintaining a relationship with women and what that looks like, how hard it is, how maintaining relationships with other women has been affected by the mother-daughter relationship. And that is all that I have for you today. I want to thank you for tuning in and listening to She Speaks with Yana Me. Please be sure to follow me on Facebook. The page name is She3, SHE with the number 3. You can also follow me on Instagram, SheIsMe_3. Please be sure to check out the mother-daughter event that is also on Facebook and Eventbrite, scheduled for November 2nd. I am She and She Is Me, the importance of the mother-daughter relationship. And also, please be sure to subscribe to this wonderful podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or TuneIn. Bye.